Where are the VP and director level jobs in the wireless infrastructure industry and how much do they pay? For answers, stay tuned. But first, a few words from our sponsors, Nexius and Telecom Careers.
Nexius, accelerating network and business transformation.
Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.com.
Welcome to this week's episode of Telecom Careers Insider. Today we have wireless infrastructure executive recruiter Paul Harris joining us. He is president of Global Recruiters of Blackhawk. Paul, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Well, Paul, before we dive into today's discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about some recent projections that will impact the supply and demand of wireless infrastructure people and ultimately VP and directors. So let me run through those real quick and then we'll dive into our discussion today. Is that okay?
Sure. Thanks so much.
Well, our friend in Austin, Ian Gillett, he's president of IGR Research. He recently came out with a report that projected U.S. carriers are going to spend $212 billion, or actually $1 million over the next 5 years for wireless infrastructure. Gartner recently released a report that the mobile data traffic has grown 59% year over year, reaching 52 million terabytes. That's 52 million terabytes. And they're quoted as saying mobile data traffic is soaring worldwide and more than tripling by the year 2018. And that was Jessica Ekholm, who's research director at Gartner. They're projecting that with fast mobile data connections, both 3G and 4G, they're going to slow down from, the growth is going to slow down from 3.8 billion in 2015 to 5.1 billion in 2018 as users switch from slower networks to more data-centric networks. Another point, Paul, was in June this year, Sprint announced a plan to add 70,000 small cells, which their CEO, Marcelo, said will result in Sprint having the #1 or 2 network in each major market nationwide. What's interesting, though, is they followed that announcement with a plan to cut $2.5 billion in operating expenses. Yeah. And I think it's important to note that while they announced 70,000 small cells, they haven't announced their vendors yet, but that's coming. IDC projects that IoT spending will reach 1.7 trillion by 2020. You know, yesterday we did a program on industrial IoT, and Accenture projected that the GNP of the top 20 markets worldwide or top 20 countries global-wide could see an increase of their GNP by 14.2 trillion based upon growth of industrial IoT. So those are big numbers. And then finally, Chetan Sharma gave a great presentation at the Competitive Carriers Show last week that showed some really interesting slides that we've circulated on our website. So I'd invite people to go to Chetan Sharma's website or check out RCR Wireless News for some statistics on capex and data growth over the next couple years. But let's jump into today's discussion. Paul, you and I met at a wireless infrastructure show either last year or the year before, and I was impressed by your really focus on wireless infrastructure jobs only. So I'm kind of curious, what do you make of some of these projections, and what do you see happening in hiring in 2015, and what do you expect to see in 2016?
Yeah, Jeff, well, thank you so much. And by the way, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. By the way, I got a email from Mark Ganzi this morning, and he said, tell Jeff 3 things. #1, tell him hi, tell him he's a great guy, tell him to take it easy on me. So, actually, the first 2 he actually said. The third one I made up. So anyways, yeah, there's a ton of statistics there, Jeff. And, let me go to the big picture. So obviously, wireless infrastructure build out has been great for many, many years, right? 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G. And it's absolutely, the data tsunami is going to continue unabated, right? So, the kids are not going to be stop downloading their YouTube videos from their smartphones. You've got grandparents now FaceTiming with their grandkids, IoT, Internet of Things, connected car, none of this stuff is going to wait. And so the build out has been great. It has to continue. Obviously, there's been a little bit of slowdown for the past, 6, 12, 18 months with AT&T, obviously. Sprint, as you mentioned, We're all kind of waiting see what they're going to do. But the bottom line is all four wireless carriers have to continue to build out. Mark Ganzi at CTIA at the Tower and Small Cell Summit, during his speech, he basically said, "Hey, you guys, billions with a B, billions of dollars of investment is coming." Ron Bizik from Tarpon Towers talked about the perfect storm, right? So the perfect storm he defines as all four wireless carriers aggressively building out at the same time, which we haven't seen for a while, but it's definitely coming. So it's not a matter of if it's coming. It's obviously a matter of when, and it's going to be a wonderful time for us in the wireless infrastructure industry from a recruiting perspective, and also for the people who are working in it.
Well, let's take a step back again. Our goal today is to talk about the wireless infrastructure career opportunities with a specific focus on VP level and director levels. Why don't you maybe provide us the way you look at the industry and the ecosystem from your point of view?
Sure, absolutely. So Jeff, in our office, we call it, my orbit is the four legs of the stool. So we'll talk about that in a second. But just to give everyone a real quick overview. So we recruit in three things: telecom, and telecom. We do a ton of wireless infrastructure. I'm typically working, Jeff, with the C-level folks, right? So the CEO, the COO, president, board of directors members. And yes, like you said, we're usually recruiting directors and VPs of sales, engineering, and operations. We do some one-offs as well, but we could go on forever for that and talk about that. But bottom line is that's where we play. The orbit that I live in is we call it the four legs of the stool, right? So the four legs of the stool, number one, obviously where it all ends up, the tier one wireless carriers, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, helping them build their system out, et cetera. The second leg of the stool is obviously the OEMs, right? The original equipment manufacturers, the Ericssons, the Alcatel-Lucent, Samsung, Nokia, Siemens, ZTE, Huawei, et cetera. The companies that actually produce the equipment that are going, in the cell site, on the towers, et cetera. The third leg of the stool is obviously the tower companies, right? American Tower, Crown Castle, SBA, Global Tower Partners, before Mark sold to American Tower for $4.6 billion, but who's counting? But obviously Digital Bridge is back in the mix and they're doing well. Yeah. The fourth, obviously very aggressive. So the fourth leg of the stool is what we call the service companies, the companies that are, if they're fortunate enough and lucky enough to have a direct relationship with the tier one wireless carriers, so no one's, quote, stepping on their margin, right? But sometimes someone is stepping on their margin and they'll be subcontracting through, Crown Castle or Ericsson or something like that. That's where we play. Well,
let's talk about the organizational structure, the big for operators as it relates to engineering roles and operations roles.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, Jeff, so when we are recruiting people, what we're constantly trying to do is try to figure out who they know, what they know, et cetera. So here's what we're looking for. And here's the way we look at the world. So number one, let's take AT&T first. So AT&T, obviously very, very, pretty centralized. If we're hiring like a SVP person, senior VP, someone really, really strong, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find someone who's snuggled up pretty closely with the people in either Dallas or Atlanta. If they're more of a director position, we want to make sure that they have those connections basically at the director level. So those would be the Kieran Nolan out west. It used to be Kevin Haynes in Central, not anymore. Chris Bondurant, Barry Johnson, Cundiff, Petropola, Mike Moss, Mo Catabaugh. Those are the type of names that we're listening for as we're talking to someone. Do they really know? Do they know these people? Who do they know? Etc. As you know, it's a lot. As you know, Jeff, it's a lot about who you know these days.
Sure.
The other thing I want to mention, Jeff, is that when so it was about a year ago, basically, I think it was last November, that AT&T had what I call this, mass retirement party. So who was it? Ernie Carey and Chris Renee and Tim Harding, a whole bunch of people, took the goodie bag and went and did something else. So clients will say to me, "Hey, Paul, make sure," we call it the new regime versus the old regime. So Paul, make sure they know people. It was great that they knew the people in the old regime and they were great people, and but guess what? They're gone. So do they know the people in the new regime? And so the names we're looking for is like Susan Johnson and Veronica Bloodworth, et cetera. So that's AT&T. In Sprint, obviously, for years it was, hey, Paul, find us. If it's a real high level person, find someone who's snuggled up closely to the Overland Park folks. Now with Masayoshi-san flying from Japan and kind of landing in San Francisco before he takes the trip over to Overland Park, a lot of the requests are coming in. I make sure that we know somebody in San Francisco. If it's director position, then we're looking for the relationships with like Eamon or Santee or Hennigan and stuff like that. T-Mobile, pretty simple. This. For years it was just hey, find us the guy that is tight with Dave Mayo, right? As they used to say, hey, the guy with a checkbook, Dave Mayo. But I got to tell you, Jeff, you've seen him speak at these different trade shows, and I'm telling you, I changed my mind or my opinion of him of just the guy with a checkbook. I mean, he's a SVP of technology, smart cat, right? I mean, he I could go on. I'm a real fan of his. Not only does he do a great job on his speech, but when he's on a panel, he's they're firing questions that he doesn't have time to prepare for, and he knocks the cover off the ball. So
yeah,
I'm saving fourth one. You know why, right? It's Verizon. You know it, Jeff, right? They're a different bird, right? And I don't say that in a bad way. I mean, obviously Verizon's system is wonderful, but as you know this, Jeff, right? They're highly decentralized. And so just because you're knocking the cover off the ball and you're in good with everybody in this, 19 or 21 markets or regions or areas or whatever they call them these days, it doesn't mean that you're good to go in other markets. Agree? So that's my world that we live in.
So going back to just the AT&T, highly centralized, but then they have how many regional directors would an AT&T have, for example?
I'm not so sure I know exactly how many regional directors they have. I just know that the names, if people start mentioning the names,
got it.
That's what I'm looking for. Generally, do they know people who go, what's going on? And sometimes they'll say, hey, Paul, I don't know at this, the regional director level, but let me tell you who I do know. And then, I'll call in my market and say, can this person help, et cetera. So, yeah.
And then how does that structure of a carrier differ from the organizational structure of, say, a system integrator, a service provider?
Well, Jeff, here's the point that I like to mention when we talk about those type of folks. So, as you know, what they try to do many times is they try to not necessarily obviously have a different structure than that. What they try to do is they try to mirror from a geographical perspective how AT&T is laid out, how T-Mobile's laid out, how Verizon's laid out, how Sprint is laid out. So they try to mirror it. So they'll even call if they say, hey, somebody at AT&T, we just hired a director of, then they'll name the name of the exact region, market, whatever that person is in charge of to try to mirror it.
Got it. Well, one of the teasers on today's show is talking about pay ranges. How much do these jobs pay? And so what can you tell us about the pay ranges for director level folks and VP level folks within those four legs of stool you mentioned earlier?
Sure. Okay. So basically, let me kind of break it down because sales is a different bird, right, than engineering and operations. So let me take it one at a time. Let's do sales. So sales for let's call it like a director of sales. And Jeff, let me make sure that I'm clear, and I make this sure with everybody that we're recruiting for, that we're talking to, that many times when it's a director position, I will say, hey, dear Joe or Betty or whatever, I want to make sure that you're clear up front. This is, I call it a great title, but you're an individual contributor, right? So you don't have any direct reports, you don't do any, job performance appraisals, et cetera. But it is a very, very big job. You're going to be in charge nationally for this account, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, et cetera. So they're pretty big jobs. The ranges that we see, Jeff, are, it's going to be a wide swath. So I'll try to kind of pare it down a little bit, but let's call it 125 salary to 175 salary. That's where we see it. Frankly, we haven't seen a lot of 125s in a long time. So usually it's, roughly around $150,000 salary. And that's on a 50-50 comp plan. So in other words, if it's 125 salary, it's another 125 upside. So a total target of 250. If it's 150 salary, then it's 300. If you get into the kind of the bigger, the higher echelon where they're getting 175 up to $200,000 for a individual salesperson, obviously need to be very, very strong. Then what we'll see, we don't usually see a 50-50 comp plan, so 175 plus 175. what we'll usually see is maybe like, another 50% or something like that, because they may be required to do some coaching or whatever, so of some other people unofficially. Or it'll be a flat fee, like 175 plus another 100,000. And those at-risk portions are usually based on, goals, hard goals, and then sometimes it's MBOs, right? Management by objectives.
Right.
So that's what we see. For VPs, it's usually it's 175 to 2.25 for VP. Senior VP would maybe be a 250, and then the at-risk portion of the show would probably be a little bit lower as a percentage. It probably wouldn't be a 50-50 comp plan, because obviously their job is to coach their people, mentor, be out in the field with them, do strategic planning, etc.
Right.
I'll switch to the engineering operations real quickly. So obviously it's a different deal, right? Because they're not, incentivized highly to go out there and kill it and sell like the salespeople are. So what we'll see, director of, turfing director or something like that. What we usually see, Jeff, is like 140 to 170, salary. And then what we'll see is then a bonus on top of that. And those bonuses run from, 25 to 35, as high as 40. So, somewhere a bonus in the 20 to 40 range.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the basic, roughly the pay scale. And
how would you compare, working for an OEM or a system integrator versus a carrier?
Yeah. Okay, Jeff. Well, here's what we found. What we find is that it's really not a big difference in terms of the compensation, salary, and bonus opportunity or something like that. I mean, and you can see this coming, right? What is it? It's basically benefits, right? So if you're working for an AT&T or an Ericsson, right, great benefits at Ericsson, great benefits at AT&T. If you're working for I'm just going to exaggerate, $25 million, $50 million company that's not public, et cetera, you're probably not going to have the same benefits. You may not have a 401k. You're definitely not going to have stock options. You're definitely not going to have those golden handcuffs. The other thing to mention in those kind of different tiers, in those 4 different buckets, the 4 different legs of the stool, is sometimes it's a prestige thing, right? Some people will say to me, Paul, it's got to be, Ericsson or AT&T, or you can forget talking to me or something like that. And some people will say to me, hey, Paul, I work for a big, large tier 1, get me the heck out where I can really, really affect change, make a difference, et cetera. So the prestige and status is different depending on who you're talking to.
Got it. Well, let's talk about career progressions. We don't all start out as a director or VP. Let's start with the VP of sales. What types of people, what's the career path look like in that VP level role? And what types of things have you seen in your career? You've been doing this a long time, tend to contribute to making these guys or gals most successful.
Sure, absolutely. So, in my orbit, it goes like this, and I'm not so sure that we could, point to, all that many people that say, hey, Paul, I started as a construction manager, then I was a project manager, I was a senior project manager, I was a program manager, I was a director of VP, and now I'm an SVP. I don't know how many times that comes along, because sometimes, somebody comes out of, college or with an MBA, and someone in the top says, wow, this guy's a smart person, smart gal, smart guy, put him over here. So, it's hard to say if that is indeed the progression, but what we do see that. And what else we see is sometimes people will say, and clients will say, hey, Paul, find me someone, that's a salesperson that does this and knows these people. And guess what? I'm way okay if they came out of engineering and operations. There's a certain, how do I say it without sounding bad? So, sometimes salespeople, oh, he's a salesperson, right? And some people will say, hey, this guy came from, what we do. We know that he knows what we do. He hasn't sold it, but he's done it. And sometimes candidates want to do that. They want to take that step into sales. And sometimes clients say, hey, Paul, find me a person with that built-in credibility, and no one can look him in the eye and say, what do you know? You've never done it before. You sold it, but you've actually never done it. So we see that a lot as well.
Got it. And how about progression within the engineering? Where do folks kind of start and how do they move up? And then we'll compare and contrast that to the operations side.
Yeah. Well, I think with engineering operations, it's a little bit different in terms of with operations people, many times they have a chance to go into sales. They get into different upper level management. Same thing with the engineering people. They can obviously go up the ranks, and you see some really smart people matriculate through the system, et cetera. The difference is that where we mostly see the engineers getting into sales, they're usually go from an engineering person to a sales engineer, right? A solutions architect, et cetera. The highly technical sales where the salespeople will bring them in and say, "Hey, listen, I got us an appointment, right? I got us an appointment, but man, I'm going to be lost when those engineers start talking to me. Can you come and join us and help us out?" So we see that progression from engineer a lot to sales engineer to sales.
Got it. Let's move on to what's going on outside the United States. And we'll pick on Gansey since you brought his name up earlier. When he sold Goldtel Partners, he kept those Mexico assets.
Yeah.
And certainly have seen SBA move more aggressively into Latin America. American Tower has been aggressive all over the world. But it's kind of interesting now. You saw in China where they formed a tower company now, I think has 1 million towers on their own, which is kind of not our traditional 3 or 4 tower owners here in the U.S. And in other parts of the world, in India, you've seen some emergence of some new players in the tower ownership business. But what does that mean to folks in the U.S., whether it be in sales or engineering, that might be looking for opportunities globally?
Sure. Yeah, Jeff, great question. Thank you. So what's going on outside of the U.S. So there's a lot of talk about, what's happening in emerging markets, and then, LATAM, Mexico, et cetera. So I'll try to kind of do it a little bit, more globally, so to speak. But the bottom line is that, if you go to these trade shows and you hear the CFOs or the CEOs for American Tower, Crown Castle, SBX, et cetera, talking, basically what's happening is the emerging markets, depending on where they are between 5 to 15 years behind where we are in the United States. So right, we've seen this movie and we know how it ends. There's going to be a ton of growth. There's going to be a ton of jobs created. I'd say Mexico probably 5 years behind us. Some other places 15 years behind us. And in terms of the investment into these the presidents of the American Tower, Crown Castle, SBA, et cetera, along with their CFOs, are always constantly measuring market risks, dollar fluctuation, the political climate, et cetera. And that's why you see ATC, SBA, Digital Bridge, et cetera, going in, and Crown Castle not so much. But I guess for the sake of this conversation is, we've seen us go from 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G. We're going to see the same thing. I heard a statistic, I can't remember. I think it was at CTIA when I heard somebody say this. I can't remember what it was. But in the United States, there's about 1,000 subscribers per cell site. Once again, 1,000 subscribers per cell site. In Latin America, it's 7,000 subscribers per cell site. So obviously, is that called pent-up demand? I think it's called pent-up demand. And that's why you see a lot of investment by, Gansey and these other people going into those markets. You see AT&T, who invested $4 billion to buy a Usacell and Nextel Mexico, and committed another $3 billion to build up the LTE roadmap, obviously in all 9 regions down there in Mexico. And actually, we're recruiting in all 9 regions of Mexico. And the difference of that, and let's say Brazil, is that like Carlos Slim, he dominates 70% of Mexico, whereas AT&T only has 10%. Whereas in Brazil, it's a lot more even. So just for example, 4 carriers times 25%. A little more evenly distributed than Mexico, with Carlos only 70%. Anyways, sorry, Jeff, for rambling, but man, tons of. I
guess the question, though, Paul, is how portable are the engineering skills you've gained here in the U.S. to Latin America or India or other parts of the world? How portable are those skills?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the answer is absolutely transferable. And you will find companies that are looking for, as they call, expats, right, to be a CEO of this company or a CTO of this company, et cetera. So you get these guys or women that know how to build a system out. They know and the biggest thing is, right, they've done it. Right, they've done it before, and people will pay them a truckload of money to say, "Hey, listen," and they say, "Well, I can't speak Spanish, or I can't speak Portuguese, or whatever." They say, "Hey, don't worry, that's not a problem. You just go down there and then we'll find the local people." And we're in the process right now of finding the local people that really know the market and can really help, as we call it, truncate the process, right? I've done it before. I know who to go to. I know who all the subcontractors are. I know who the good ones are, the bad ones are, et cetera. I'll help you build this thing very quickly. So yeah, the skills are wildly transferable, yes.
Well, you mentioned the CTO and CEO. How about the project managers and design engineers? Are those skills transferable? Are you starting to see placements of, middle-level folks, individual contributors within engineering and operations?
Yeah.
Are they being sought out because they have the experience and because some of these markets are 10 to 15 years behind the U.S. build?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they need people all throughout the value chain, from construction managers to project managers to directors, et cetera. And then once again, from the level that we recruit, like I said, directors and VPs, they're really looking for someone who can, like I said, help me truncate the process, help me find the person who can get in and then just help me build a team, because they know the local talent, they know the local ordinances. There's weird stuff that happens in different markets, right?
Okay. Well, we're running up on the back end of our time here, but a couple things, when you're talking to more junior folks, and what advice do you give them to say, here's some of the things you should do if you want to break into that next level of being a director or VP?
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend they do?
Well, Jeff, you could probably guess what's coming here. So what we really try to do. There are three things that the companies are looking for in people that we recruit right now. So obviously, it's a very tight market, right? In other words, they're I won't call them picky, I'll call them very, very selective, and they should be. So what they're looking for is, number one, and as they have to be great at what they do, right? They can't be just good at what they do. They have to be great at what they do. Number two is they have to be connected, right? Companies are saying, Paul, find me the guy that's so well connected that when I call up, ABC company, they're going to say to me, hey, if you don't hire that guy, you're an idiot. You got to get him. And also, we'll probably give you some more work because he's on the case. We know things are going to go well. So that's the second thing. You got to be well connected. Number three is you have to have a wonderful, great reputation. And that's what I alluded to here just a second ago. People need to know you, call in and say, yeah, got to hire this person. Let's go. And so what I would obviously advise people to do is obviously be great at what you do, study, learn, grow, get your connections, and obviously develop yourself a great reputation.
Well, let's talk about, social media has changed the way companies recruit, whether it be LinkedIn or otherwise. What advice do you give folks relative to how they manage their social media presence and to find new opportunities?
Sure. Absolutely, Jeff. So obviously, social media has changed the way, everything works in our world. I must tell you, from our perspective, it hasn't really changed a lot in terms of how we do what we do. So in other words, I'll get a job order from somebody. I will be thinking in my head, well, I'm getting, oh my gosh, I know the perfect person. If I don't, what I do is I pick up the phone and I call into my network and I say, hey, I got a client looking for this person that does this, and lives there. Who should I be talking to? They give me their phone number, say, hey, tell them I said hi, and then we call them up. So it hasn't changed our world a lot, but I will tell you that obviously from this perspective, obviously Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, but obviously LinkedIn is the big one for us. I mean, us in the recruiting industry. And I think the biggest difference is that, 20 years ago, if you said to your boss, hey boss, I'm going to post my resume, on every lamppost and everywhere, they're going to say, well, you're crazy. You can't do that, and now it's socially acceptable, right? To do that, and your online resume is out there for the world to see. And you definitely I would encourage everybody to have it built out, make sure it's clear what you do, make sure those keywords are in there. So if somebody's searching for a person that does this and this and this, your name will pop up in a search.
Got it. Well, we are out of time, but I do have one final question for you. And then,
Sure.
How do people get in touch with you or see what types of positions you're currently looking to recruit and fill?
Sure, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, right? Paul, and you type in Paul Harris, Blackhawk, or recruiter, or GRN, or something like that. I'm sure you'll find me, and all my contact information is there. The other thing I'd like to mention, Jeff, is that whenever I go to a trade show, I come back and I do a video review. So we love our daily dose of RCR, and we appreciate everything you guys do, and we'll read it every day. But there's nothing like being in a trade show. So we go to several trade shows, and all those trade shows, I give like a 10, 15-minute summary. Those are on our LinkedIn group, along with all of the jobs where we post all our jobs, and that is Telecom and Wireless Global Network. So once again, Telecom, and Telecom and Wireless Global Network.
Got it. Well, I do want to give one plug. I'm in St. Louis today, Paul, and I'm actually meeting with a company called Local Power Network. So they provide, they actually build and design networks for folks. They've been doing a lot of work for carriers. They told me this morning they visited 13,000 cell towers for clients over the past couple of years. And then they have a software package called Ocular IP that monitors circuits and provides a portal so that you can see what kind of performance you're getting off circuits. So I couldn't help but give a little plug for my friends there at Local Backhaul Networks. And I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to thank everybody else for joining us on this week's episode of Telecom Careers Insider. Paul, have a great week.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Appreciate your time. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
To reach Jeff Mucci or to suggest a show topic, you can reach him at jmucci@rcrwireless.com. For all telecom-related news and information, please visit rcrwireless.com. To connect with the industry's top talent, please visit telecomcareers.net.